podcast, TruthSeekah's podcast. Buckle up, everyone. We're going to talk aliens, UFOs, ghosts, spiritual and paranormal. From all of the three moons, beyond your wildest dreams. Nice.
TruthSeekah and or its affiliates are not responsible for any strange phenomena that may occur during or after listening to this podcast, which may include the following: heightened senses of awareness, psychic abilities, UFO sightings, alien contact, time loss, out-of-body experiences, ringing in the ears, ESP, lucid dreaming, increased synchronicities, astral projection, telepathy, stronger intuition, levitation, miraculous healings, and or remote viewing. Please be advised to listen at your own discretion.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? To a place to walk on troubled seas, faith to stand when I don't believe. I just wanna be with you. Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
You are now locked into the TruthSeekah Podcast.
Gargoyles! Psychics! Everything's ungodly! Dark savage!
Streaming live at TruthSeekah.com.
She's not a Christian!
Give it up, y'all.
Your portal to the paranormal, esoteric, and all things spiritual.
She's tampering in dark savage stuff!
And now, your host, TruthSeekah.
Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is the TruthSeekah Podcast. I'm your host, TruthSeekah. Excited, delighted to be with you guys for another amazing episode. As we cover all things spiritual, we're going to be talking about the connection between psychedelics, Christianity, religion in general. If this is something that interests you, make sure you stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. I want to give a huge shout out to everybody supporting my work via Patreon. This is a listener-funded show. Doesn't exist without your help. And so thank you for believing in the work that I'm doing, the information that we're bringing to the table, all of that stuff. If you want to get access to some behind-the-scenes stuff, my entire discography of music, all of that really cool stuff, head on over to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to my entire discography, which is 200 plus songs. And, I do music and talk about the things that we discuss on the podcast. So I've definitely discussed this subject in my music. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, you get access to all of it by becoming a patron. Thank you guys for believing in the work. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. You also get access to our Thursday night School of the Mystics, which is the community aspect to what we're building here with the podcast. We also have the Discord community and all that really cool stuff that you get access to. Make sure you check it out. Also, for those of you who have not had a chance to check it out yet, make sure you pick up a copy of my new book, Spirit Realm, Angels, Demons, Spirits, and the Sovereignty of God, forward by Jordan Maxwell. There's a huge portion of this book where I covered my experiences with psychedelics and plant medicine. And this was something that, knowing that I have a pretty big Christian audience, I was kind of hesitant to put in the book because I knew it would step on some toes, it would ruffle some feathers, that I wouldn't be able to be interviewed in certain podcasts and radio shows and circles because of the content that I put in there about psychedelics. But I really believe in being open and honest with our stories and our experiences and what we're finding, and so bringing our truth to the table so that we can get some insight about the sacred plant medicines. And so we're going to be talking about that today. My guest is the author of the Psychedelic Gospels, The Secret History of Hallucinogens in Christianity, Jerry Brown. Jerry, welcome to the TruthSeekah Podcast, man. How are you?
Excellent, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you and all your listeners are safe and well in these strange days.
Oh, for sure, man. Where are you joining us from right now?
I'm joining you from Europe.
What time is it there?
It's about 3:30 here, almost 4 o'clock.
Okay. 10 a.m. here. So awesome.
All right.
Power of the internet, technology, all this cool stuff.
It's amazing.
There's a lot of people doing podcasts and things right now. People who don't have podcasts are starting them today because all they have is time on their hand.
I'm sure. Zoom is one of the only stocks that's going up these days because everybody realizes, all the universities are going on to online courses and businesses, and you can imagine. Yeah,
my first experience with Zoom, I threw Skype out the window. The first time I tried Zoom, the quality, the clarity, the audio bit rate, I was like, I'm not doing Skype anymore. You can tell a Skype interview. So we're going to be talking about hallucinogens and their ties to Christianity, specifically the art, which is a lot of stuff that you guys have brought to the table with your book. Your book is by you and your wife, correct?
Yeah, my wife and co-author, Julie Brown. Julie's a therapist who studies the roots of religion. She also was the photographer who took all of the images, all of the photographs of the sacred mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms that we found in Christian churches throughout Europe and the Middle East during our travels. So she's a major part of this book.
So many places to start, but I want to preface it with this. Is one thing that I really appreciate about your work is that you're not on a tirade to disprove or debunk the person of Jesus or the Bible, or saying that it's all myth or allegory and things like that. Like some people who approach it from the psychedelic standpoint and show that they'll try to prove that Jesus never existed, that it was just the different mythologies and things like that. It's like they have an art against it to kind of debunk Christianity, but you guys don't approach it from that standpoint. You approach it as Jesus was a historical figure and these things really took place and things like that, right?
No, that's absolutely true. First of all, we're not here to challenge anyone's faith in their religion. As with many religions, we think Christianity is a beautiful religion. What we found is we're here to reveal a truth that is intertwined in the roots of many religions, from Judaism to Christianity to Buddhism to Hinduism. There's a psychedelic mushroom at the roots of Hinduism in the Rig Veda, the oldest written Hindu scripture. And so I want to make that clear. Our work should not be confused with the work of John Marco Allegro, who in 1970 wrote a book, a pioneering book called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And while we agree with Allegro and applaud him for having had the courage to explore the psychedelic roots of religion, we disagree with him on three fundamental points. First of all, he claims that Jesus did not exist. We fundamentally disagree with that. We believe Jesus was an incredible teacher and a historical figure. Number two, he makes the claim based on faulty linguistic analysis that the entire Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, is a metaphor, a hidden code for the psychedelic mushroom. We disagree with that fundamentally, and his work was even challenged by linguistic scholars. And thirdly, Allegro certainly was on a crusade to undermine what he to free people, what he called from the thrall of religion, in this case Christianity. So we disagree with him on all of those points. We quote in our book Brother David Stendhal Rast of the Order of St. Benedict, who said, if we can encounter God through a sunrise seen from a mountaintop, why not through a mushroom prayerfully ingested? And that, in a way, to way oversimplify things, is the essence of it. Shamanism, the religion of all of our hunting and gathering forefathers, was deeply involved with psychedelics. And it brought people in those days directly in contact with the gods and goddesses of their faith. And we believe that psychedelic mushrooms can give people a direct experience of the divinity. In fact, that was proven in an experiment done in 1962 called The Miracle of Marsh Chapel at Boston College, where the researcher, Walter Pankey, took two groups of Protestant divinity students, and he gave one of them on Good Friday a dose of psilocybin, and the others a placebo, niacin, B12, which would make them get a flushed feeling. 9 out of the 10 divinity students who took the psilocybin had a full-blown religious experience. And 25 years later, they said that was either the most or one of the most significant experiences in my life. Only one of the divinity students who had the placebo had that kind of experiment. And that has been verified back at Johns Hopkins, 2004, many years later. It was verified. And one of the things we're finding today, and I don't want to get too far ahead of the discussion, but that in the current psychedelic renaissance, where they are using the medical therapeutic applications of people to help them from depression, end-of-life anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, the researchers led by Roland Griffiths, the grandfather of the psychedelic renaissance, said that the more intense the mystical experience, the religious experience, the more successful the therapy. So to summarize that, in no way are we here to criticize anyone's religion, but hopefully to reintroduce a aspect of Christianity, a part of Christian history that is embedded in the artwork.
Now, would you how big of a role did plant medicines and specifically magic mushrooms play into the foundation of Judaism, Christianity? Are they founded from a psychedelic experience, or was the magic mushrooms incorporated into the encounter with the divine?
There's no way to know that. The chicken and the egg. I mean, there are some people who argue that all religions sprang out of the expanded awareness of the other realms, the angelic realms, the ethereal realms, the supernatural realms, the different levels of the universe, depending on your philosophy. There are others who believe that psychedelics inspired religious thoughts by taking people into realms that we cannot achieve in normal consciousness, dealing with the basic issues of survival, making a living, negotiating ourselves through the landscape. So there's no doubt about it in the research that's been done, and there's a special issue of the Journal of Psychedelic Studies devoted to religion and religious histories that shows roots of psychedelics in Judaism, in Christianity, in Mormonism, in Buddhism, in Hinduism, and several other religions. So there's no doubt that it is intertwined. We base, as the astrophysicist Carl Sagan was fond of saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And we know after we made our first discovery of a psychedelic mushroom in Roslyn Chapel, which was constructed in the 1400s by Sir William Sinclair. And we started asking these questions about, why is this here in a Christian church? That led us to undertaking our research through churches and abbeys and cathedrals throughout Europe and the Middle East. We realized that there is no Christian art. We have a lot of documentation from early Christianity, as early as 300 AD, all the way through the high Middle Ages. It ends with the Inquisition, and we can get to that later, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and the Inquisition was triggered by the Black Plague of the 1300s, which killed 50 to 60% of the population of Europe. It was devastating. So there's no Christian art prior to 200 for a lot of reasons: poverty, persecution, no buildings in which to portray this art. So Julie and I, my wife co-author, and I went back to the Old Testament, the New Testament, and even the Gnostic Gospels, the alternative Gospels that were found in Egypt in 1945 were discovered and then translated, that there are many passages in the Bible that are suggestive of psychedelics. For example, let me give you one example from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. This doesn't mean it was written by Thomas, but it's the Gospel of Thomas. In that passage, Jesus says to his disciples, "Compare me to someone and tell me whom I am like." Thomas said to him, "Master," and I'm quoting, "Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like." Jesus said, "I am not your master. Because you have drunk, you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring, which I have measured out. He who will drink from my mouth will become like me. I shall become he, and the things that are hidden will be revealed to him." Now, what's astonishing about this passage is we're talking about a drink. We're talking about a bubbling spring, which is a metaphor for some kind of intoxication. But Jesus says, "which I have measured out." That means we're talking about a dose. And those of us who've been involved with psychedelics know that dose is a very important component in the kind of and the depth of the psychedelic experience that one has. And then, obviously, this is not wine. I mean, Jesus is saying, "You will become like me and I will become like you." They're obviously having a transpersonal fusion of their beings. And the things that are hidden will be revealed to him. Well, the kingdom of heaven is within. So we find, Derek, in these and other passages from the New Testament, that there is indirect evidence. We don't have any smoking gun. We don't have any visual evidence. And we probably never will from that time to know how deeply this was involved in the origins. But when you look at it through what we've learned about the Christian art, and we recall that Pope Gregory in the 6th century said, "Let art be the Bible of the illiterate," because most of the people were illiterate, were peasants at that time. There's no doubt that this was embedded in the artwork to instruct the initiatives. This is not something that was suppressed, as some people argue, because we found it not only in small churches and tiny chapels way off the beaten path in the forests of France and Germany, but we also found it in the high holy places of Christianity, in Chartres Cathedral, in Canterbury Cathedral, in Hildesheim, in the Church of St. Michael in Germany. And I can show you some illustrations of that work at some point in our conversation.
For sure. If you wanted to get those out now, that'd be awesome. The weird thing about that, because you were talking about all this, but then you said that there wasn't anything that was found at the Vatican when you guys were there. You would think that they would be. I know there's all types of other mystical art, but there was nothing about the magic mushroom at the Vatican that you guys found?
Yeah, we went through every major room, all 57 displays of art and statues and tapestry in the Vatican. And the artwork of the Vatican starts only in the 15th century. And by that time, the Inquisition is in full swing. It started after the Black Plague of the 1347-48 to 1352, which wiped out, as I say, 50 to 60% of the entire population of Europe. The church, which was supposed to have the hotline to God to be able to protect people, they were devastated as well. The clergy were getting as sick as everyone else. And they looked for a scapegoat, and they blamed it on the wise women of Europe, who were the repository of all of the herbal medicine, midwifery, gave birth to babies, herbs for healing, herbs for medicine, aphrodisiacs. And it is at this point that the wise women of Europe, who also knew about these hallucinogenic plants, become branded as satanic witches. Up to that point, witchcraft was a civil crime. Oh, she poisoned my well. Oh, she killed my cow. Okay, 6 months in before the stockade, or 3 months in prison and a fine. But now, under a papal bull, witchcraft became a heresy, punishable by death. And it is after this point that the witchcraft trials begin, and they go on, off and on, for 300 years, culminating in the great witch hunt craze. So at that point, these psychedelic images in Christianity are considered pagan, are considered heretical, and they disappear. They're not taken out of the art that exists, but there's no new art created. So that's kind of where the closure point is. We started our work because at Roslyn Chapel, and I'm holding up an image of a psychedelic mushroom that's embedded into the forehead of the Green Man. There are over 100 Green Men who are sculptures of images of pagan figures, because Roslyn is an early fusion of both highly Christian symbolism and pagan Christianism and pagan symbolism. And we found in the forehead of this Green Man, as you can see in the highlighted mushroom image, an image of an Amanita muscaria mushroom. That's this red and white mushroom that probably many of your viewers are familiar with from Scandinavian fairy tales, from what's that, Mario Brothers, the video game. And this image is widespread. And that mushroom has the bulb, it has the bumps. It's not in color, but it has the bumps for the cap. And when we were doing our research, we talked to an eminent mycologist, Paul Stamets, who has a very impressive website called Fantastic Fungi. I want to mention that again, Fantastic Fungi, because he has many fungal cures for many ailments on that website. And Paul has many excellent books on mushrooms, not only psychedelic, but mushrooms in general. Mm-hmm. And we asked Paul, do you agree that this is an Amanita muscaria mushroom? He said, absolutely, Jerry, Julie. This is a taxonomically correct Amanita muscaria mushroom. And this was the kind of thing, we wrestled with this. We really did, because we said, okay, what's going on here? What is Sir William Sinclair, the founder of Roslyn Chapel, trying to say? Were mushroom rituals conducted in this church? What about in other churches in Christianity? And how far back does this go? And our wheels are starting to spin, and we're almost at what I call the rambunctious overthrow of reason, when we realize that, this is controversial. And unless we had powerful, compelling evidence, not shoddy linguistic evidence as Allegro had, we could never convincingly publish this theory. So that convinced us. And we got to a point where Julie and I said, look, this is one of those things. And I don't know, Derek, if you've had this experience. We're going to regret this for the rest of our lives if we don't go out and try to find the evidence on this. So in 2012, Julie and I took a trip. We went through Scotland, England, Europe, France, Germany, Italy, Greece. We went over to Turkey. We went over to Israel. And we found evidence of psychoactive mushrooms, both the red and white Amanita kind, which has been used in Siberian reindeer shamanism and is very involved with the story of Santa Claus, which is a whole other discussion. And we found psilocybin mushrooms, of which there are 100 variety of psilocybin. They grow in very many places throughout the world, through Europe and the United States, in forests, in parks. And we found psilocybin mushrooms as well. So we found images of both. We found these in tiny chapels. We found them in churches. We found them in cathedrals. We found them in abbeys where priests lived and worshiped. And we even found them in cave churches in Turkey, where early Christians went to fled Roman persecution. When we say art, we found it in mosaics, paintings on walls in church. We found it, not mosaics, inlays on floors in churches. We found it in frescoes, paintings on walls in churches. We found it in sculpture. we found it in illuminated manuscripts, which are prayer books or Bibles. So we found it in bronze castings of church doors. We found it in multiple media. One of the first places we went was the tiny chapel of Plain-Carrault in central France. And by tiny, I mean this chapel is 20 feet wide by 60 feet deep. And in the apse, in the circular structure at the base of the church, there's a painting of the Garden of Eden scene, the temptation scene. And as you can see here, this is unlike a Garden of Eden that you might have seen before. This is from the 13th century. It was done by a Christian religious order that built this church on returning from one of the Crusades. And in the middle of this fresco, this painting on the wall, we see a giant Amanita muscaria mushroom. In Romanesque art, size matters. And you can see that the mushroom, which in nature would be small, is as large as Adam and Eve. You see the snake coiled around the tree. You see other mushroom caps also dotted coming out from the base of the mushroom, and mushrooms grow in clusters. And Adam and Eve have already taken the mushroom because they're covering themselves. And if you look closer, you'll notice that Eve's body is skeletonized and Adam's is to some extent, which indicates that they're already in a transcendental experience, going to another realm. Now, what's going on here, we asked ourselves. As we recall from Genesis, God created the Garden of Eden. He placed Adam and then Eve in it. He said, you have dominion over all the animals, of all the fruits you may enjoy. However, in the center of the garden, there is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And of that tree thou shalt not eat, or on the day that thou eatest thereof, then surely you shall die. Well, what's interesting about this is God didn't kill Adam and Eve. And they didn't die, obviously. They went on to generate, according to the Bible, the human race. So what we believe is going on here is the artists, the church patrons, are all of them together indicating that there is a psychoactive mushroom, even as far back in the foundation story of Genesis. If you ever have questions about any of this and want to jump in, let me know, and I'll just continue along. And
we can talk about that point a little bit, because like in a lot of times when people are having this discussion in Christianity, right, it's the fact that, hey, we were, that is what they partook of. It was, some people even say it's opening the third eye, and they were told not to do this, and then they'll say that these plant medicines assist you in opening up the third eye, being able to see into the spirit realm, being able to know as God knows. And we were forbidden to partake of that fruit. So even for those who will say, yes, there is some link between Christianity and the magic mushrooms, they say it's something that we're not supposed to partake in. What would you say to that, as far as having the knowledge of good and evil by partaking in it, but it was something we're forbidden to do?
I think there's two sides of that. I think the fact that this is so prominent and that God is so clear about this indicates that he knew that this was something very powerful. And our interpretation, which is in our book, the Psychedelic Gospels, all of these photos and all of these all of these images are discussed in depth in our book, the Psychedelic Gospels, which is available on Amazon, is that what's really going on here? Some people say, oh, well, that was an apple. Well, obviously that's not an apple. And I don't think there's any artist in the history of Christianity who's depicted half of an apple impaled on a stake in Genesis. Number two, some people say, well, this is about the fall. This is about original sin. Mm-hmm. But let's look at this, because obviously the interpretation of original sin comes in to the New Testament. It is not there in the Old Testament. It is a Christian interpretation of a Hebraic myth, a Hebraic foundation story. What we believe, and again, this is controversial theory, is what this is saying is that God had given his creatures the incredible gift of free will. And that this was a test because he was secretly proud that they had had the courage to not continue as docile dunces, unconscious animals as the rest of his creations, but took the courageous step to use their curiosity to develop intellect, art, and appreciation of the divinity.
To become like God, quite literally, like the Creator.
And in this interpretation, and I'll get to that point in a minute. In this interpretation, Eve is not the evildoer. Eve is not the one who allows evil to come into God's perfect world so early in the creation. This is a puzzle that's befuddled Jewish and Christian scholars for hundreds of years. How could evil show up so early if God is perfect and made a perfect creation? But in this interpretation of plain Kuralt, Eve is not the evildoer. Eve is not the weak-willed woman. She's the courageous one who showed humanity the way to higher consciousness and is humanity's spiritual guide. Now, there are other things in Genesis. I mean, I encourage everyone to read Genesis with this passage in mind, because a little later on, God says, well, now that they've eaten of the tree of good and evil, what if they eat of the tree of immortality and become as to us? Well, who's this us? I mean, we're not in the New Testament. There's no Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Mm-hmm. So who is this us that God's talking about? But coming back to the point here, that what is happening here is an acknowledgement that psychoactive plants, in this case, Amanita muscaria, which is a powerful hallucinogen that's used today by the reindeer herders of Siberia, known as the fathers of shamanism, as a portal to God. And what we see maybe in the Bible is with the coming of monotheism, a suppression of these earlier belief systems. And that's why it was forbidden.
Let me ask you about that really quick, because this is something that I have written down here. So I guess two things to kind of set up this question. Where were you at with plant medicine, especially magic mushrooms, before you partook of this journey of going to try to, have you had any encounters with psilocybin or anything like that before you went on this discovery?
Oh, yeah. And that goes back to the 1960s and 1970s. I mean, Julie and I both came of age in the 1960s and 1970s. And we've had, I've had very significant psychedelic experiences that I describe in the book. Julie, who's had a lot more psychedelic experience than I have as well, she had a cosmic consciousness experience, which is available on our website and the video description of it. And basically, we were both skeptics about religion, at very least agnostic, not sure. But it was through psychedelics that we had our first experience of God as a divine presence that permeates the universe. So we were already involved in psychedelics. And out of that, and out of my first experience with psychedelics, which was really quite frightening, being a professor of anthropology, teaching at Florida International University in Miami, where I started in 1972. And after this first LSD experience with a group called the Rainbow Family, high in the mountains of Colorado, I had a frightening experience, and I designed and taught a course on hallucinogens and culture, which didn't go into this material about Christianity because I knew nothing about it at that time. So we had these experiences, and I just want to say, stepping back today, many decades later, we are delighted and astonished that psychedelics have had, if you pardon the pun, a second coming, and are now getting spread globally through the psychedelic renaissance, and especially through the clinical medical research, which is demonstrating through FDA-type controlled trials that these psychedelics can really be helpful. That got all washed away, all of that early research in the Nixon's, banning of psychedelics in the 1970 Controlled Substances Act. But both Julie and I had psychedelic experiences early on.
Okay. So I wanted to ask that. And then, so what about an experience with the Amanita? Have you guys had Amanita muscaria? Because we just had we did a men's retreat, went into the forest and kind of had this spiritual retreat and partook of the Amanita muscaria. And obviously it's very different than psilocybin. I don't know how spiritual I felt with the Amanita. What was your experience? Because I know this is the main one that we see in the iconography. Now there is there is psilocybin, there is a lot of those images and things that you have as well, which is different. Like that's 100%. I'm with you on the psilocybin, but the Amanita, which is kind of like the dominant imagery that we're seeing, for me, I didn't feel like they were very spiritual. What's your experience with the Amanita?
I would agree with you.
Okay.
And we found both. This is the Amanita muscaria mushroom in different stages of its development. And we found both very present, prominently displayed in the Christian art. Both Amanita muscaria, red and white references, and psilocybin. The Amanita muscaria mushroom, and here I want to just pause and say to your listeners that the Amanita family contains some of the most deadly mushrooms in the world, including Amanita phalioides, which is called the death angel. There's no known cure for its toxins. People can die from it. There's also Amanita risala, which is known as the sickener because it can make you really sick to your stomach and maybe wanting to write a goodbye letter to your loved ones and friends, although you won't die. But every year, about 200, kids, they read about this in the literature. They see it on television. They see documentaries. Certainly, they see it all over the internet. If you just click in psychedelics, end up getting their stomachs pumped, because they went off into the highlands of Maine or the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies, and thought they found an Amanita muscaria mushroom, but they didn't.
Yeah.
That said, and look, people ask a lot of times, well, what is the experience of psychedelics? I don't think that question can be answered easily generically unless you're doing it in controlled clinical settings with known dose and a guide that's taking someone on a guided trip. I think that everyone has different experiences depending on the dose they take, where they are. Are you on, Broadway or Times Square in New York, which I don't recommend, or are you high in the Rockies or on some beautiful, on the Pacific Ocean shores of Vancouver Island? I mean, you're going to have very different experiences, and also where you are psychologically in your life. For me personally, they sometimes call Amanita muscaria the thunder god or the thunderbolt, certainly in the Hindu Rig Veda. And I had just a feeling of incredible power surging through my body.
Now, is this with Amanita or?
With Amanita muscaria.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. The more spiritual experiences that I have had have been with LSD.
How much was the dose, if you don't mind me asking?
Mushrooms. It was about the equivalent of 6 caps, dried caps, ground up.
Okay.
And drying is.
Did you drink? Did you drink or eat them?
I mixed them in a tea and drank them, and it's very important here about drying because in the process of drying, the ibotenic acid. There are 2 psychoactive components in Amanita muscaria: ibotenic acid and muscimol. And muscimol is the more powerful psychoactive substance. And in the drying, the ibotenic acid is converted to muscimol. So drying is very important. We've had, there are many reports on Reddit and Arrowhead, different psychedelic sites, about people who've eaten Amanita raw and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And they say, well, this isn't psychoactive at all. Well, they haven't prepared it correctly. I mean, the Siberian shamans dry it for a good period of time around a fire or on trees, on the branches of conifers, Christmas trees, because Amanita grows symbiotically in the humus, in the decayed pine needles of the fir trees. So I wanted to say that. Now, while we're on the topic of Amanita, one of the things that Gordon Wasson, the founder of modern ethnomycology, the study of the cultural uses of mushrooms, and the unwitting founder, a decade before Timothy Leary, of the modern psychedelic movement because of his discoveries of ancient uses of psychedelic mushrooms. One of the things that he discovered in his masterwork called Soma, Divine Mushroom of Immortality, in which he argues that there is an Amanita muscaria mushroom at the base of the Hindu Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is a giant poem cycle over 10,000 stanzas, organized in 10 books, 10 mandalas, and one whole book is in praise of Soma. They talk of it as the mainstay of the sky, the pillar of the sky, the divine udder. And in one of the most famous verses of the Rig Veda, which was written down in the Sanskrit about 3,500 years ago, coming down from an even more ancient oral tradition, was that we have drunk the Soma, we have found the gods, we have seen the light. What can the malice of mortality, of death, do to us now, O immortal Soma? One of the things that Wasson found was that Soma, unlike peyote, unlike the mescaline in peyote, unlike LSD, unlike the psilocybin or psilocin and psilocybin mushrooms, is not well metabolized, the ebotanic acid in the muscimol. It goes out from the body, and some of this, and this might be a little difficult for some people to grasp because it's way beyond what most of us are consider acceptable, that if you drank the urine of a Siberian reindeer shaman, you would have the same kind of experience. And there's documentary evidence of people seeing, way back in the 18th century, Siberian reindeer shaman coming down from the tree where they have expounded ecstatically after eating the mushrooms and urinating into the cups of their kinsmen who drink the urine. And there's a passage in the Rig Veda where it said that come like a stag, pissing Soma day and night. You have assumed your most mighty force. So this is one of the things that led to the definitive identification, botanically and physiologically, of Soma as being the Amanita muscaria mushroom in the Rig Veda.
Do you think that it was mixed with something?
Well, it was mixed with milk of cow milk and honey, and they talked about how they mixed it to make it more palatable.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. We have another trip planned in 17 days to go out with the Amanita. And hopefully I'll have a different. I mean, it was interesting. It wasn't psilocybin though. I'll say that because psilocybin changed my life. But the Amanita was a bit different. Which I enjoyed it. That communicating with it. Let me ask you that. I want to get back into the religious part of. Well, I got some more questions for you.
Sure, and I've got some more slides to show you when you're ready.
What do you think it is? I love the way that Terence McKenna put it, and he mentioned this one time, and he says that these mushrooms are almost like walkie-talkie devices between us and the gods or the angels, the angelic God himself, that when we ingest this, it's almost like whether it's encoded within the mushrooms themselves, or it just gets you in this state where you can receive from the divine. What do you think that they are? Like, why are they here? And what is it? Does that make sense? Like a walkie-talkie with the angelic? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I might phrase it differently. I have the greatest respect for Terence McKenna, who's one of the great psychonauts, psychedelic pioneers of our era, and with others. Let me refer to Stanislav Grof, who is the founder of LSD psychotherapy. And when it was legal, Grof had guided over 3,000 psychedelic trips. And he came to the rather startling conclusion that we are just not simply biological beings, but we are connected and part of and a manifestation of a divine presence, a divine intelligence that permeates everything in the universe. As my mother put it shortly before her death, she was beaming. She had had a vision, a dream. She said, "Jerry, God is a river of love that flows through the universe. And all I have to do is let go." She was ill and flow into the river. And a few days later, she was gone. So I really believe that the mushrooms are a portal that expand our consciousness and allow us to experience different levels of awareness, including the cosmic consciousness that many people call God or the divine. I also agree with Paul Stamets that the mushrooms are teachers. Look, they were here 1.4 billion years ago. And there's no doubt in my mind that the mushrooms are conscious entities. And it is through ingesting them, we can communicate with them. The mushrooms that we see are only the fruit of the mycelia that spread like a vast computer network through the forests and uniting and decaying humus and communicating with each other, and sort of have the morphology that the internet has. And I believe that the mushrooms are conscious being, and speaking personally, I believe they're teachers sent to help humanity evolve. And maybe instead of looking for the aliens to come in giant spaceships, as in Alien or Star Trek or something like that, maybe these are the aliens who've come way before we were here. And maybe they're bound up with our evolution. They're certainly bound up with our consciousness, and they're certainly being used today for healing, for creativity, and for many other things.
Yeah. I like to look at it like they are the communication devices to communicate with the ones that are way out there, kind of like the portal to the gods or the communication device, which is awesome. I think it's about doing I think people become like psychonauts and they become hooked to this kind of thing, and like their only spiritual experience comes from anytime that we're going to do ayahuasca, we're going to do peyote, we're going to do psilocybin, and they just have all these things. And so for me, it's the teaching aspect from it was like, I'm going to give you these revelations and then you need to apply them to your life. And that was kind of the big thing for me. There's a bunch of stuff to do. And for me, it was like a life review of like things that looked like it was going to take me months to kind of unpack and apply to my life to get where I was supposed to be, whether you want to say destiny wise or something like that. But other people would come out of it and be like, I'm ready to do it again next week. And I'm like, no way. Like we had to, like, this blew me away. I would feel like I was, not respecting and honoring the medicine to do that. Sure. There's a big difference there whenever it turns into a party drug, and you guys really speak against that in the book and stuff as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think these are sacred, should be treated respectfully. And look, any substance can be abused. I mean, and we as a culture tend towards extremes. We abuse alcohol, we abuse cigarettes. People have abused psychedelic drugs. And this is why I'm so encouraged by two things. The psychedelic renaissance, which is being spearheaded by the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS.org, and in England by the Beckley Foundation, is taking these drugs through 3-stage FDA-approved clinical trials to show that they can be used in psychotherapeutic. And someday, hopefully not in the not too far distant future, there will be a legal psychedelic psychotherapy center near you. But I ask, coming back to this, what about the rest of us? What about those who do not need drugs for mental health? What about those 30% of young people in the Pew Religious Studies poll who say, I'm spiritual but not religious? What about people who haven't found what they're looking for in institutionalized religion, whether that be Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and who want to use or who have found their true psychedelic connection and maybe even a life purpose, as I have, through their experience with psychedelic drugs? This is why Julie and I argue for the legalization of psilocybin, not simply the decriminalization, but the legalization as a right of religious freedom, not to be used cavalierly, but to be available in sacred centers with the availability of trained guides, and where only people who were mature adults, not psychologically fragile, because then you really need a clinical session, could take them. This right already extends to peyote use in the 300,000 Native Americans through the Native American Church, which uses peyote as a sacrament, which was reaffirmed by the 1993 Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And that right has been extended to people in the United States who use ayahuasca in the branches of the Brazilian church, Santo Daime. It is interesting that in Brazil, where Santo Daime and the União de Vegetal, UDV, is widespread, the Brazilian Council of Bishops have approved and endorsed the use of ayahuasca in this Christian ritual, which is evidence that today in the world that psychedelics and Christianity can be compatible and can be useful together. These drugs are not toxic. That was proven a long time ago by Albert Hoffman, the discoverer of LSD, who identified the psilocybin molecule in the psilocybin mushroom. They're non-addictive, but people can become psychologically addictive to anything. The real important thing is, can you learn from these? Can you take time and integrate these lessons into your life? I personally have not had a lot of psychedelic experience, but the experiences that I have, which I can count on less than two hands, have been fundamental to my life. Yeah. I don't think it taught me to choose love over fear, LSD, and to choose to marry Julie when I was frightened to death of making a commitment. It helped me to understand overcome my fears, which I experienced, my deepest fears in my initial psychedelic experience. And recently, in moving to Europe and retiring, quote unquote, because we're still actively pursuing our research and writing, I fell into a deep depression because I was no longer had my support system. I no longer had students. I no longer had my position as Dr. Brown. I thought I was going off to oblivion. I would never work again. My ego was attached. I went into a rare 9-month-long depression, and I lost 22 pounds. Was this after an encounter? No, this was no encounter. This is when I retired and moved to Europe. And I thought this, and people might think this is bizarre because for most people, this is like the best thing that can happen. You finally can retire and do, what you truly enjoy without having to be somewhere at some time. And for me, it was, I lost my identity. And nothing helped me. Psychotherapy didn't help me. Emotional freedom technique didn't help me. I went to a psychiatrist. He gave me antipsychotic drugs and sleep. I love to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I lay there with obsessive thoughts running through my mind. I wanted to go back home. I wanted to go back to work. Nothing helped me. Finally, where I live in Europe, there's an ayahuasca center. And I was scared to death of going. I was so fragile. I felt the giant anaconda would come out of the forest, devour me. And Julie said, look, I can't put up with this anymore. You're driving me crazy. This was supposed to be our dream time. And all you want to do is complain and go back home and begging me. I just can't put up with this. I went to the ayahuasca session, and it was in a room, a Santo Daime session. And I drank the ayahuasca, and there was chanting and there was music. And in the hallucination of the ayahuasca, three main things happened. I saw that I was a prisoner of my ego, and I couldn't enjoy myself because I was trapped in that old ego that was attached to being an important person back in my old work. That the bars of that prison shattered. The second thing is, I had been so obsessed and self-centered in this depression that I gave little thought to what I was doing to my beloved wife of nearly 40 years, driving her crazy, ruining this was supposed to be our golden years together. And I experienced this from inside her, of what it was like to her to be living with me at this time. And the last thing is, I saw the depression as literally a black snake that was inside of me, that I was spirit possessed.
Wow.
And I grabbed it and I wrestled with it and I took it out. I pulled it out and I flung it away, and it slithered away, never to return.
Wow.
I fell asleep. I woke up. I was completely rested and conscious. I drove home. I went to sleep again. I woke up. I was singing again the next morning. And I like to sing in the morning. I love music. And Julie said, you're back. So, yes, ayahuasca, people can overcome depression. And these things can be very helpful. But then I had to integrate that into my life, which I have. The depression never occurred again.
That's amazing. That's a powerful story. Thanks for sharing that.
And many people, have this thank you plant medicine, because ayahuasca has exploded out of the Brazilian Amazon and is going global, certainly in Europe and the United States and Latin America.
That's good. I love that. So good. Let me throw this at you. So we're talking about the plant medicine being able to cure depression, to give you life's purpose, to give you another perspective. I really feel like it allows you to take a higher perspective, whether you want to say God or the angelic or whatever, of looking at your situation with love, right? Versus being in it and surrounded and you can't see anything. You kind of get to step back and get a bird's eye view with love and compassion. Okay, this is what you do. We're going to get rid of it. It's all good. The rest of your life is going to be beautiful. This is how you're going to do it. And like, there's this teaching aspect that kind of comes with it. That's what I feel. But it can help alleviate depression. But I wrote about this in my book. Can it cause depression? Because once I went on my second encounter, which was a hero dose, and it was like edge of the universe. I'm getting all of these life reviews and what I need to do. But I found myself coming back to my day-to-day, my job. I've touched the brink of eternity. I've been to the place where we go when we die. I've seen what I want to do with my life. I know that I'm just a blink in eternity, that my days are numbered. My heart's going to stop ticking and I'm going to go to the abyss. Why, spend the rest of my days, working for somebody else, not attaining your goals, these kind of things. And I felt like it almost produced depression in you because you've been able to see the other side. You've seen what is possible. But if you don't take the steps to walk in that direction, that it produced this loathing, you know what I'm saying? And making you feel like you're depressed. Like there's like, I see the potential of me to be, for me, a musician, a podcaster, a teacher, all of these things that I am now. I did it, but it seems so far away that it almost like produce this depression. I don't know if that's making any sense, but
Sure. Because, I mean, look, you're doing a marvelous service, and you're part of a network of what's a global psychedelic movement and a global psychedelic society. You're an artist, you're a teacher, you're a podcaster. If you thought you knew, is this enough? Is this fulfilling for you? Or is there something else that you really wish you'd like to accomplish that this brought you to an awareness of?
Well, now I'm
You don't
good.
have to answer that.
Now
I
I'm
mean,
good, but back then it seemed
Okay.
so far away to get to wake up and do what you love for a living. I think that's the majority of us people
Oh,
listening
sure.
to this. That's where they are. You know what I'm
Sure.
saying?
And so what I would say to that is two things that, and this happened to me also, that this brings you to an awareness. I think we all have a life's purpose, what the psychologist James Hillman called the soul's code. And I think that one of the things that happens is that psychedelics bring us in tune with our soul's code of what we're really here for. Pain is the difference between knowing what we should be doing and not living our truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes, psychedelics can make us very aware of that if we're not in a relationship that's good for us, if we're not doing work that we believe in. And we have to live with that awareness, which is painful. So the other side of that is having the courage to go out and create that future that we know we need to live. Mm-hmm. Can we do that? Or are we going to live what the poet called, lives of silent desperation?
Yeah, that's good.
I had an incredible psychedelic trip, which are described in the book, in Jamaica back in 1979. And I went down to Jamaica. I was on a spring break from school. I fasted. I like to fast and cleanse myself. And I fasted on the beaches of Jamaica, where ironically at that time, marijuana was illegal, but mushrooms are illegal. And they had, mushroom tea stands there. And on the fifth day of my fast, I'm walking down the beach, and this Rastafarian comes along with eyes blazing and hair bouncing up and down. He's got a little bag. And we're right there on the turquoise shores of Jamaica, gorgeous ocean, sunlit. And I say, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm the mushroom man." And I say, "What have you got in the bag?" He says, "Well, these are the finest from the mushrooms from the Blue Hills of Jamaica." I took him back to the person I was living with. He knew what they were. I was staying with in Jamaica. He said, "These are psilocybin." He put them into a tea with some honey. I went out to the beach, and I had a powerful experience where I consider this God's voice that told me that atomic power and atomic energy is evil, and you must destroy it.
Wow.
Okay, this is after like 4 or 5 or 6 hours of communing in the water, becoming a dolphin. It was an incredible phylogenetic experience.
Yeah.
I rested the next day. I got on the plane back to Miami. I come out of customs. I see the newspaper, 3 Mile Island, 30 minutes from a meltdown. Now, this is what Carl Jung would call a very powerful synchronicity. And that led me into work in the anti-nuclear movement and the safe energy movement, renewable energy, hydrogen power, etc., that I did in my academic studies as well, and through nonprofits, through the World Business Academy for decades. And it was that experience that put me on the path. Now, I had to take the leap of faith to move from my love of the Maya and the Aztecs to do what I felt either my deep inner voice, which it would be for some people, my spiritual guide, which it would be for others, or God, which I saw this as God speaking to me. It felt that way. Mm-hmm. I had to have the courage and the will to walk down that path. So I think this can also happen out of a psychedelic experience. And that's healing also. When we do the work that we know we were born for, that kind of gives our soul wings, then we know we are in harmony with sort of divine purpose.
It's good stuff. And we kind of, we're at this precipice where you have to choose, am I going to go down this path, or I'm going to give up on it? For me, it was like this weird, I remember shedding tears over this and just crying, like, when do you give up on your dream? Like, what age is it just a pipe dream and you just let it go? And like, I'm in the system, I have to do this for the rest of my life. And it's like shedding tears. But I really do believe that blood, sweat, and tears are the magic elixir of dreams to make it happen. And it was at that point that I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this one last time. I'll give this one shot, because I don't want to, be 80, 90 years old and be like, man, I wish I would have took that shot. And I did it, and things worked out. But it was from the psilocybin, adventure for me, and communing with the divine.
May I
go ahead.
There's another aspect. We talk about also the healing aspect of this.
Yeah.
When I was on the radio talking about my psychedelic experience, I was contacted a few days later by a guy named Wiley Gray, who leads a group. He's an ex-Marine, 2 or 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan. And he was extremely depressed, suicidal, and ayahuasca took him out of that. And now what he does is he leads groups of veterans who are experiencing similar post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is fabulous, because they describe the VA as Candyland. I mean, they've got pills, they give them pills, but they don't help them.
Yep.
So it's very important that this is used in healing. And I think when people talk about psychedelics a lot of time, they're always talking about searching for God. And sure, that's one aspect, or searching for the divine, or searching for purpose. But we also have to remember that Jesus' mission was a healing mission. And I want to show you, if I could, 2 other slides from our book.
Let's do it.
Sure. This is the cover of our book, but it comes from an illuminated prayer book called the Great Canterbury Psalter, which was done in Canterbury Cathedral, started in 1180. And the opening drawings, illuminated drawings trimmed with gold in the book, are the story of Genesis. And here's God creating plants. But wait a minute. God is actually creating psychedelic mushrooms. And you see the red and white Amanita muscaria. You see the blue psilocybins. And psilocybin, when it's touched by oxygen, oxidizes and turns the color blue. And 2 other psilocybin-like mushrooms on the side. Later on, in the Great Canterbury Psalter, Jesus has been baptized. And here we see the image. Can you see this well?
Yeah.
Of Jesus healing the leper. What's really interesting about this is there's a scroll coming out of the leper's hand in Latin, and it says, "Master, if you will, heal me." And the scroll coming from Jesus's hand to the leper's back says, "I will, be cleansed." But what's fascinating about this, Derek, is that the scroll from the leper's hand is not going up to Jesus. It's going down to one of the psilocybin mushrooms in the bottom of the drawing over which Jesus stands suspended. We think it is the artist telling us their awareness of the role of sacred plants in healing, and that these were integral to Jesus's mission.
That's awesome. You also have another one with a depiction of Isaiah, right?
Yes.
And it was something to deal with the coal that Isaiah touched to his lips, right? And was there
absolutely
something with that being a mushroom as well?
Yes, absolutely. This goes back to, you recall the giant Amanita muscaria mushroom I showed you in Eden?
Yeah.
So the day after seeing that, Julie and I drove 2 hours east in central France to, again, a church, not as small as this chapel, a larger church called the Church of Saint Martin de Vic in central France. And we walked into the choir. This goes back to the 11th, 12th century again. We walked into the choir of the church, and there was this incredible fresco. Can you see it there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of two biblical scenes thrown together. One, the coals being presented to Isaiah, the purification of Isaiah's lips, and the very famous scene of Jesus entering Jerusalem. And as we looked at this, Julie grabbed my arm and she said, "Do you see what I see?" And up in the upper right-hand corner of the fresco, this is a painting on the wall, we saw that one of the joyful youth who was greeting Jesus, who was sitting on the ass, coming into Jerusalem with his disciples behind him, is holding on to the stem, not of a palm tree, but of one of 5 oblong, tan, brown psilocybin mushrooms. When we go back to 700 years, and very often in Renaissance art, we see 2 different historical biblical moments depicted together. The hand, the angelic hand coming out from the other dimension to Isaiah, it's obviously not holding a burning coal, nor which would be either flaming red or black, but it's holding a round shape. We then looked at the painting on the next wall, which showed the towers of Jerusalem. And here Jesus is walking towards the Tower of Jerusalem, and on the top of the towers of Jerusalem, the youth are cutting down with long knives psilocybin mushrooms. And underneath them is a prophetic figure holding a scroll saying, "The prophet goes forth." Now, Isaiah was a true prophet. He foresaw, unlike many of the other Old Testament prophets, he saw the coming of the New Testament. He saw the coming of Jesus. And what really stunned us was that right under the towers of Jerusalem was this picture of the Last Supper. And there are mushroom shapes on the table. There's the same kind of knife that was cutting down the mushrooms on the top. And here at the bottom of that fresco, and I don't know if you can see them, and all of this is in our book, the artist has drawn mushroom shapes into the hems of the disciples. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So we saw this was not only one image, but this was sort of a Christology showing the role of mushrooms in the mission, in the coming, and even in the Last Supper. And so we feel that there was a sacred plant involved in Christian history. After that, this we saw in central France, we had to ask ourselves, look, what's going on here? Is this a marginal cult of Catholic Christian hippies cavorting in the forest of France, far from the crown, and the church? And we decided we had to go to the high holy places of Christendom, to Chartres Cathedral, to Canterbury Cathedral, to St. Michael's Church in Germany, to see if there were mushrooms in the high holy places. And we found them in every place. We found them in 7% of the 176 stained glass images in Chartres Cathedral,
wow,
which is one of the great pilgrimage sites of Christianity. We found them in the illuminated prayer book of Canterbury Cathedral. And in many cases, look, we don't know who drew these mushrooms, who sculpted these mushrooms. Was it the artist? Was it the church fathers? Was it the patrons who financed the church? Or was it all three collaborating together? But in the case of St. Michael's Church in Hildesheim, Germany, we know exactly who it was created by. It was created by Bishop Bernard, who was an important figure in medieval Christianity. He was the tutor to Otto III, who was the Holy Roman Emperor. He founded St. Michael's Church because the emperor, for his service, gave him a fragment of the true cross, and he built the church around it. And he was later sainted about 100 years after his death by the Catholic Church. So this is no marginal figure. He created bronze doors with psilocybin mushrooms. He created a Christ column, showing a bronze column with the helix of Jesus's life from the baptism to the entry into Jerusalem. And in 5 scenes, including the transfiguration, we show Jesus and the disciples portrayed with prominent psilocybin mushrooms depicted so precisely that ethnobotanists can tell that they are the Liberty Cap variety. This image in the transfiguration is very significant because the transfiguration is one of 2 scenes in the Bible where a miracle happens to Jesus rather than Jesus doing a miracle. And in this one, his disciples are off to the side. The old biblical prophets approach him, and God speaks through the clouds and says, "This is my son. Hear him well." So this is where humanity and divinity intersect, and it's set among psilocybin mushrooms. So this was no marginal aspect. This was integrated into the early and medieval church for the initiates as one way to experience divinity and perhaps have a glimpse of immortality directly.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so awesome. It shows the depiction of the journey of the life cycle, and then there's mushrooms along the way. And again, we don't know who did all of this art. If it's like they hired somebody from outside the church who just kind of hid that stuff in there, but it's there, right? And then there's some of the different ones that you said that was actually done by the bishop as well. So these were high figures in the church. Let me ask you about this, because a lot of people link this together. They think that manna in the Old Testament was mushrooms. Some would even say that the manna in the Old Testament was magic mushrooms. I'm more along the belief that it could have been a mushroom. I don't necessarily believe that they were magic mushrooms, hence the fact that it was only Aaron and Moses who were receiving messages from God and then relaying it back to the people, when all the people were eating the mushrooms, right? But it was only Moses and Aaron who were hearing from God. What's your take on manna being mushrooms or magic mushrooms?
Well, in a really excellent book on manna in the Old Testament, Dan Mercour argues that this was indeed a psychoactive mushroom, but it was not an Amanita muscaria mushroom or a psilocybin mushroom. It was the Claviceps purprea, which is a small LSD-like mushroom that grows on stalks of grain or rye or barley. And it comes up and it's there in the dew. And this is what Dan Mercour believes was the manna of the Old Testament. So I believe there could very well have been an element there. Now we know for certain that in the Greek Eleusinian mysteries, which were a shamanistic rite, not carried out in the forest by some, Amazonian ayahuasca taking people, or by Maria Sabina in the Mazatec people, or in the great forests of the reindeer herders, but carried out at the large archaeological site of Eleusis, which is about 14 kilometers west of Athens. And this practice of this sacred pilgrimage to Eleusis, which took place once a year, the Greater Mysteries, and any Athenian who had not committed murder was allowed to go in their lifetime on this. In the Eleusinian mysteries, they drank a potion known as the Kikia. Plato was there. Many of the luminaries of Greek society was there. And you could not talk about what you experienced upon punishment of death. That's how sacred they believed it was. R. Gordon Wasson set out to try to understand what was the mystery of the Eleusinian mystery. Was there a psychoactive mushroom involved? He put together a team involving Albert Hofmann, the famous Sandoz chemist who first synthesized LSD and had the first unexpected LSD trip in history when he accidentally spilled it on his finger, and Carl A.P. Rook, who is a classical scholar of Greek and Latin at Boston University. And to get to the essence of this, Albert Hofmann said that the potion, which involved barley and honey and a liquid, involved the LSD-like substance of this tiny Claviceps purpurea, this purple-looking mushroom that grew on wheat and barley. It was also responsible for some of the mass hysterias and mass hallucinations that happened from time to time during the late Middle Ages in France, where bread was baked containing this tiny psychoactive mushroom that got into the barley or into the rye. So definitely, I believe there's a connection with mana here.
Yeah, there were some who were even saying that it was either that or either some type of mold that was actually baked into the bread, and they said that that's the reason for the witch trials and everybody being on edge, thinking that they had witchcraft done to them, but they were eating these magic mushrooms or this poisonous mold, and they weren't even aware of it. They thought someone had put spells on them or something.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when people are frightened and they look for explanations, and certainly before they have a kind of a physiological or biological basis for this. Also, in the Middle Ages, the datura plants, which contain atropine, belladonna, mandrake, deadly nightshade, thornapple, those were used by the wise women, by the witches. And that's another plant that was used in what became known pejoratively as satanic, the rites of the satanic witches. Yeah. But I want to, if I may, come back to a point you raised earlier about your being able to step outside of yourself and see yourself. And one of the real innovations of the psychedelic Renaissance, carried on by Robin Carhart Harris and his group at Imperial College in London, is the neurological imaging of what happens to the brain on LSD. So Dr. Harris and his associates have been able to take normal subjects, do imaging of their brain, neurological imaging, and then give them LSD. And, they had that old Nancy Reagan ad many years ago, this is your brain on drugs. Well, now we can literally see this is your brain normal, and this is your brain on LSD, or this is your brain on psilocybin. And what happens physiologically and neurologically, and Dr. Harris has described, in normal consciousness, the brain is in its default mode network. And the neurons usually run down the same paths over and over again, recreating experience, interpreting experience. Yeah. In depression or obsession or addiction, the brain goes through the same loop over and over and over again, as I did with my depression, punishing myself. Why did you leave your past behind? You made the biggest, over and over and over again, driving myself nuts. What happens, and he shows this neurologically, is that under LSD or other psychedelics, other neural pathways open up and the brain starts to integrate and diffuse and see things in different way. It's as if, to use an analogy that my wife's psychotherapist, Julie, uses, it's as if under normal consciousness, we're looking at everything through a pinpointed flashlight. And under psychedelics, and you're in a warehouse, you're in a big dark warehouse, and you're looking with this pinpoint flashlight, and you can only see little pieces of it. And under psychedelics, the floodlights go on, and you see the whole picture of your life. And this is why it's so effective for post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans who've been through such extremely painful experiences that on normal consciousness, it's just too painful. They can't get near it. But what ayahuasca and other psychedelics do is they allow them almost objectively to look back at their trauma, understand it, cathartic, and move beyond it. So this neurological imaging with, magnetic imaging is one of the real advances and tools that have come on in the psychedelic renaissance.
It's awesome when science is proving your spirituality, right? There's actually a scientific way to explain what's going on. I felt like I was looking at myself like, God, well, there's neurogenesis that's happening and the brain cells are, restructuring themselves. And the interesting thing is that I deal with a lot of people who are in hypnotherapy and things like that. And they're dealing with people who are dealing with trauma and depression and things like that. And it's just about approaching it from another perspective, another aspect, and again, getting you into this dream trance-like state and changing your response to what happened. And again, you're just in a loop, like you said, versus like being able to see it from a universal perspective, in the essence of eternity, as big as this was for me, as traumatic and as hurtful, versus in the scope of eternity, and then in the scope of love as well, which is really beautiful for the healing process. And it's really helped me as well. So it's beautiful you put it like that. But
you bring science... you bring up a really interesting point now, because we know from the Miracle of Marsh Chapel experience, which was replicated using more modern methodology by Roland Griffith at Johns Hopkins University, which recently received a $17 million grant to create the first university center for psychedelic studies in the United States. He replicated that research. And in his research and that of other scientists in the Johns Hopkins team on depression, on end-of-life anxiety, on addiction, what they're finding is the intensity of the mystical experience is directly correlated with the effectiveness of the healing process. That's a kind of incredible statement for two reasons. Some people have referred to this as white-coated shamanism. And what we have here is the irony that scientists in the laboratory are now able to predictably recreate a mystical experience, which was always seen as the anathema, the contrary of the opposition to science. And here, where I want to say to people in the religious community, is as this psychedelic renaissance goes forward and this gets validated scientifically, medically, and more people see that this is a pathway to religiosity, will the churches, the synagogues, the mosques, and other places of prayer leave the mystical experience, the leadership in the mystical experience, to the scientists and the psychotherapists and the psychiatrists, or will they bring that back into the fold of the church, where we could see that maybe once a month churches at sacred centers and synagogues and other places of worship would offer this experience guided by psychotherapeutically trained clergy who could guide people to a psychedelic religious experience. Yeah, that's kind of one of my hopes that would come out of this work in the long term. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this happens in the near future or but it's happening.
I don't know about across the board, but it's definitely happening.
Well, when I talk about the church, I want to point out, have you come across Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind?
I have not.
Okay. Well, Michael Pollan, in a nutshell, very famous food author, wrote about food and the evolution of food and the way different societies, promulgated apples for food and roses for beauty, etc. And he wrote a book, and he experimented with psychedelics. He had 3 trips, interviewed scores of people, and he wrote this book, How to Change Your Mind. It's all about psychedelics and healing and research. And given that he is a New York Times best-selling author, he was on all the major talk shows. So he really helped shift the modern image of psychedelics. Because of that book, Ron Dreher, a conservative Catholic and the editor of the American Conservative, wrote on his website a long letter to Christians and says, a Christian reconsiders psychedelics, was his article. And he went and he said, look, I have to have a talk with you about psychedelics. It's going to take a while. Sit down and listen. And he said, look, psychedelics are now proven to help people heal. We as Christians are for that.
Yeah.
Number two, psychedelics can recreate the mystical experience, which is at the core of religious experience. We Christians think that is important. So I think there should be a new conversation and an opening. Now, I say it's a long step from that, and I applaud Ron Dreher for writing that letter and for inviting Christians and conservative Christians as well to read about these findings. It's a long, long step from that to accept our work that says that Christianity has a psychedelic history and that maybe one day psychedelic mystical experience will be reintegrated back into church practice.
Yeah.
That's a big step. I don't know if it's going to take the 300 years that it took the Catholic Church to forgive Galileo, or if it's going to happen in our lifetime. But I think we are hopefully laying a responsible foundation for that conversation.
Yeah, we are. We definitely are. And I've just seen what impact my podcast of just being open and honest about my experiences as a Christian with psilocybin, with meditation, with breathwork, all of these things, and seeing it catch on and other people talking about it and putting my head out there. And I'm kind of known as the Christian who's talking about this, right? But now there's other people, like as we're being open and honest about our experiences, other people feel more comfortable to be open and honest about them, because I'm attracting a lot of people who have already had the experience and they're believers. They don't have to abandon their faith, but they just incorporate it into their faith. And the more study you're doing, especially with your book, you're saying that, hey, it was an integral part of our faith since the beginning, which is the interesting thing, and it kind of backs up the mystical or religious experience as well. And what I've seen just from what I've brought to the table has transformed so many lives and let other people just be opened up in their pocket, right, of sphere of influence and talk about it and just be okay with even having the conversation. And it starts there. So that's the beautiful part of it for me. I
want to applaud you for that. I know it takes some real courage.
It took. I'm on this side of it now, but building up to it. Yeah. Okay, hold your breath. We're gonna do it.
We have this saying in the psychedelic movement called "find the others." Come out of the psychedelic closet and find the others and talk to them. And this has really taken off and has led to the decriminalization of psilocybin in Denver and the decriminalization in Oakland and in Santa Cruz in California. And there are pieces of legislation, referendum on the ballot in California and Oregon for 2020. We are in 2020 to decriminalize these for religious and for therapeutic purposes. But I've had not a lot, but I've had more than a number of people who are Christians, brought up in a Christian tradition, even evangelical Christians, or people who call themselves Reformed Christians, who said, your book really resonated with me, and it reopened me to my religion. And I just feel, Julie and I feel so gratified about that if our work can be a catalyst in that direction.
Yep. Paul Stamets on his interview with Joe Rogan talked about someone who came up to him at one of his seminars and said that he worked closely with Billy Graham, and said that there were times where Billy Graham and some of his staff, and this is just hearsay, but would partake of psilocybin mushrooms and have these encounters. I don't think they ever talked about it openly, but this is somebody who worked closely with Billy Graham who told Paul that, which was very interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think as more and more people come out of the closet and describe these experiences, and as the science goes forward, there's nothing fundamental that prohibits a revisiting of psychedelics within Judaism or Christianity or other religions. How's our time doing today? And I've got to move on to something in the not too distant future.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, I've got like one or two more questions if you got time.
I do, certainly.
Okay.
And it's a pleasure.
Wanted to get your take on communion, because that's a big one for me, especially because in the scriptures, because it's talking about from a Christian standpoint that you had to kind of if you were a Christian and you would take communion to commune with the Father, right? The bread and the wine, if you will, the wafer and the drink, that it was a way to remember what Jesus did and that kind of thing. If you weren't a Christian and you partake of it, that the scripture says that you drink damnation upon yourself, and it says that this is the reason why there are many who are sick amongst you, whether it's unconfessed sins and things like that you're dealing with. And there's a lot of people who are sick amongst you right now, and for some reason in Christendom we think that that's happening. Like if somebody who is not like born again into the Christian faith or believes with all the tenets, if they partake, then they get sick. I don't know. I don't think that that's happening. I don't think that we can say, see, that's why that guy is sick over there, because he did communion and he wasn't supposed. We can't really say that. But when we're looking at could communion have been them partaking of psilocybin, of the magic mushroom, as the wafer, the bread of life, and the wine, even the wine being some sort of psychedelic mushroom tea, if you will. You go through the damnation. Like if you've done the inner work when you do magic mushrooms, you're going to have a beautiful encounter with God. You're going to have a life review. You're going to see all the good things that you're doing. There's going to be insight. You're going to be able to see beautiful visions. All of these things are communicated with you with the higher beings, or what we would call angels, right? The teachers come in, that kind of thing. But if you haven't, if your life is full of sin, debauchery, you're stealing, you're lying, you're cheating, you're doing all of these things, and you haven't done the inner work, and you partake of a psilocybin experience through whatever means, you're going to go through hell. You're going to get to see the wrong, like kind of like what you've seen, what you're causing people. You don't even know it, but you're hurting everyone around you. And that's a painful experience. And so, reading about that and what happens, that people are literally sick. They're having a bad encounter because they haven't done the inner work when they partook of the communion. For me, the parallels are there with a psychedelic, definitely psilocybin encounter. Have you done any research on communion wafers being psilocybin?
Sure. Let me back up just a little bit. And this is why Aldous Huxley, who wrote a book, most people know about the Doors of Perception, which Jim Morrison took the name of the Doors from that book. And it was Huxley's experience with mescaline. And he also wrote a companion book called Heaven and Hell, because he said, and I'm paraphrasing dramatically, but if you were in a good place, you could have a heavenly experience. If you were dishonest, if you were living a life of dishonesty, some people might call it sin, living a life that's hurting people, that's, is not really good, but you keep making these choices over and over again. You can have a hellish experience, and certainly both of those are possible. And, it may take one or two or several sessions for a person first to encounter that. Like my first experience, I didn't think like Albert Hoffman that I was dying, but I was frightened out of my mind about the forces, some of the dark forces that I found in my life. And I had to look at them. I could no longer avoid them. And that's what set me on the path. And then I learned through additional therapy and exploration of psychedelics how to integrate that and move beyond the life I was living to a more honest and fulfilling life. So what is Jesus talking about in John when he says, eat of my flesh, drink of my blood? Certainly, Jesus is not inviting people to partake in cannibalism. That would have been bad to both the Jews and the Romans alike. That's one thing they could have agreed on. And we think not always, but that the original Eucharist could have been an experience of sacred plants through which Jesus could have led people to a direct experience of divinity and immortality. And we have to remember that Christianity emerged from a circum-Mediterranean environment, an area around the Mediterranean, from Egypt to Greece to that was rife with mystery cults, Platonic, Seraphonic, and Greek Eleusinian mystery cults, many of which had a psychedelic pharmacopoeia, many of which were embedded with psychedelics. So it is not implausible that the original Eucharist and these things of eat of my flesh, drink of my blood involved a psychedelic plant.
Yeah, I think I don't know how else to describe, what they said was happening to people, them getting sick. And a lot of people do get sick. Like literally you get sick, but you kind of cleanse as well. If there's toxins in you and, dealing with the ayahuasca, there's a lot of, vomiting and diarrhea and things like that too. There's like your body literally cleansing itself and becoming sick only to get that stuff out.
That's another important point, Derek, that you're raising. And this is why, these are not really party drugs. I mean, to the first God encounter experience I had with psilocybin in Jamaica in 1979, I had been fasting literally on juices for 5 days. In ayahuasca, they prescribe la dieta, a diet, sexual abstinence, no salt, no alcohol, so that you can purify your body to receive the spirit of the plant. Mm-hmm. And this is very important for people who are considering exploring psychedelics. And if you are, I strongly recommend a book by Jim Fadiman, a 40-year researcher and pioneer in the field of psychedelics, called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, that talks all about this and everything you'd ever want to know about exploring psychedelics. You have another question, and then we might wrap up for the day?
Yes, for sure. Last question here. A lot of people think that you can achieve very similar states. I will say that the states are similar through Kundalini yoga, breath work, deep states of meditation. They are similar, but I feel like they are different. There's people who say, I don't need the psychedelics. I don't need magic mushrooms because there's breathing techniques that I can do that releases DMT in my pineal gland, and I'm able to achieve heavenly states of bliss through just breathing techniques. Your experience with that and just response to that, and we'll close with that.
Sure. I think it's important to recognize what Dr. Albert Hofmann, who the now world-famous chemist, died at the age of 102. He synthesized LSD, and he was the one who discovered the structure of the psilocybin molecule. He pointed out that you only had to change one oxygen in that molecule to have the serotonin that we have in our brain. So many of these psychedelics, LSD, DMT, which is found in the pineal gland, have chemical analogs in our brain. And certainly, look, if we look at the divine as the center of this great spinning wheel of the universe, there are many spokes on the wheel. There are many pathways to the divine. There's service. There's humility to God. There's meditation. And psychedelics are just another spoke on that wheel. There is no doubt about it that they're a very powerful and accelerated spoke. And some people in the Christian community and some people in the meditation community are kind of resentful of, well, why should you be able to take a jet plane to have a divine experience when I've been in service and prayer for a decade? But this is just the way it is in some cases. And I'd like to leave you with this thought. You've talked about, we're a speck in the infinite. But Goethe, the great German poet, wrote in a poem called A Dream, Ein Traum ist unser Leben, auf Erden hier, wie Schatten auf den Wogen schweben und schwinden wir sind und wissen es nicht, inmitten der Ewigkeit. A dream is our life here on earth. Like foam on the waves, we rise and fall. We are, and know it not, in the middle of eternity. And what I feel from my psychedelic experience is that we are a divine manifestation of eternity. We're connected to all things. And I'd like to leave you with that thought.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, his book is The Psychedelic Gospels, The Secret History of Hallucinogens in Christianity. Where's the best place to pick up a copy of that book?
Amazon, and you can get it directly on Amazon, The Psychedelic Gospels, or you can buy it from other booksellers and Amazon through our website, www.psychedelicgospels.com, www.psychedelicgospels.com, or you can follow all of our current work and work we repost on the Psychedelic Renaissance on our Facebook page, Psychedelic Gospels. Thank you for this very challenging and informative interview, Derek. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for spending time with me. It means the world, Jerry. Have a good one, brother. Thanks so much.
Likewise. Blessings.
Right. Jerry Brown, ladies and gentlemen, the Psychedelic Gospels. Really interesting stuff, man. We've been talking about this for a while, and there's some interesting scriptures, some interesting things. I mean, again, let's revisit the communion scenario in the scriptures, that the scripture literally says that there are some sick amongst you. Like, it's almost like something that we have to make up. Like, what does that mean? Oh, yeah, so-and-so did, and he got sick. He had food poisoning after he... No, like, literally, people are getting sick. People are having a terrible experience after they try to partake in that. I don't know any other way to interpret that scripture that we've seen, you know. And I know we have to make up reasons and make up, okay, what it means to us or what it means for us today, you know, talking about that scripture of partaking of communion and people getting sick, you know. So there's a lot of different things to speak about when it comes to that. Talking about tapping in through breath work, through meditation, through deep prayer, mystical prayer, things like that. There are different things that we can do to tap into the spirit realm, to encounter the mystical, to encounter the divine. And I really do. I call myself a Christian mystic. I believe that the Christian experience is a mystical experience with the divine, with Jesus, with angels, with God the Father, with the Holy Spirit, with demons and other spirits within the etheric realms as well. This is very much so a mystical experience for me. It is not a religious experience, but it's very mystical indeed. And so I think that all of religion points back to that, that it has to cross somewhere. Christianity, for the sake of religion, is it's not very cool. It's not, you know, they've done some horrible things over the years, right? And to look at anything where the Spirit of God isn't. Religion for the sake of religion, of any religion, is just rules and regulations and touch not, taste not. Let's be specific. Some people need that. Some people need to be told what to do, what not to do. I mean, that's the whole story of the Old Testament. Don't kill anybody. Don't steal. Stealing's not good, guys. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. Hey, that's not your wife. What are you doing? You had to be told not to do this. The story of the New Testament is God's Spirit dwelling within our hearts and writing His laws and commandments on our hearts, that we know by nature that these things are not good to do, that we know even when we were children, if you went to a store, you took something that didn't belong to you, nobody had to tell you, you didn't have to read it in the book that it was wrong to steal. You already knew it because God's law is written upon your heart. This is the song and dance with us and our consciousness tapping into the power and presence of God within our own breath, through breath work, through breathing. And that's somebody here in the chat, is talking about, tell me how to release DMT. I don't have money to buy mushrooms. How can I get into the beautiful thing about the religious and mystical experience is that you don't need anything outside of yourself. Like, you don't need that stuff to have an encounter. You don't need it. It is different. And a lot of people will say, and I think I've said it in the past, but when we really boil down to it, it is a different experience. The mushroom experience and the doing breath work or deep meditation or Kundalini yoga, like these different things that we can do to enter the trance state. Essentially, we're hacking the dream state. The Bible talks about that one of the biggest ways that God or the divine speaks to mankind is through the dream state. And through a lot of these different practices, we're hacking the dream state by breath work, getting your body into a relaxed state. So I'll say that if you want to have a mystical experience, there are tons of Kundalini yoga videos that you can do in the privacy of your own home. Now, my relationship with God, again, I'm a Christian, is through the person of Jesus Christ and what he has done on the cross for the propitiation of our sins, making us right with God. Our sins are not held against us because of what he done on the cross. He who knew no sin became sin that we might become the righteousness of God. So knowing that, approaching the mystical experience, approaching this union that we have with God through what Jesus did, that's what I do. So that's preface of any type of breath work that you do, is engaging God, engaging the Father through the breath, engaging his spirit. The Bible uses the word spirit, and it comes back to the word breath, pneuma and ruach in the Greek and Hebrew, meaning the breath of God, the breath of life, and we can engage God through that way. So, you can watch breathwork videos. All of this stuff is on YouTube for you. You don't need anything outside of you. That's the beautiful thing. Again, that's where Jesus comes in, is the fact that you needed to go to a priest. Well, now Jesus is your high priest. You don't need to go confess your sins to a priest. You can confess them to Jesus. You can ask for forgiveness no matter where you are. That's what takes the power away from organized religion or this monopoly that we all seen, which is fallen. Religion is falling right now, and we're seeing it across the globe. The beautiful thing is we can boldly approach the throne of grace. That's why Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is within you. If it was outside of you, if it's in the air, then the birds are closer to the kingdom of heaven than you are. If it's in the sea, if it's in the center of the earth, then the fish are closer to the kingdom of heaven. But behold, the kingdom of heaven is within. And it's without. It's within and around you. So the beautiful thing is that you can go within and commune with God through breath work. Breath work is big. If you haven't had a chance or an opportunity to do it, we led the School of the Mystics in this past Thursday night, which we do every Thursday. We have a School of the Mystics that we meet. You get access to that by becoming a patron. I led us in breath work, and it was beautiful seeing, we had a lot of people with us, and most of them, it was their first time ever engaging in breath work and holotropic breathing. And many of them came back and said, wow, I feel high. I feel tingly. I feel really good. I feel like I can just tap into the trance state by doing this. And it was beautiful to lead a group of people for the first time to engage heaven in that way and engage with the Father. So it's very beautiful when you're going to meditate to maybe start with breath work. And if you want to get in on that, you want to try it, like I said, become a patron. I'm pretty sure we're going to do it again this Thursday via video chat and our hangout. So that's going to be there. So if you guys want to do that, but again, it's getting high off your own supply, that you have everything within you because you are fearfully and wonderfully made. All you have to do is change your breathing, be conscious of your breathing to have an encounter. That's all. You're fearfully and wonderfully made, like everything about your anatomy to engage God through the breath, through the trance state. I like the word trance. A lot of Christians, a lot of religious people get turned off by the word trance. But in the King James, it's all throughout there. I was in a trance on the Lord's day. I was by myself sitting in my room in my prayer time, and God pulled me into a trance. And it uses that terminology, and I really like that. Again, the trance state is hacking the dream state. It's the same thing. And as you're doing that, your body is releasing DMT every night when you go to sleep. Through holotropic breathing, you're releasing DMT through the pineal gland into your brain, and you tap into the presence of God very intentionally. So if you want to do that, man, we have a class, and we do that on Thursday nights, and we're going to probably do it again this Thursday again, because it was so beautiful, again, seeing people tap into that for the first time. It's good stuff. So you don't need anything outside of you. You don't need anything that they're selling you. If you want it, it's there for you, right? There's so many different tools and things that we can use for the mystical experience, whether it's some type of mushrooms, or there's just different teas. I really like, chamomile tea is really, really nice. There's a bunch of different herbs and spices and incense and aromatherapy. Just getting into aromatherapy, which we've done a lot of shows on this in the past. There's so many tools that you can use. Now, you don't have to, you don't need any of them, but they definitely make for a deeper experience, to enter the trance state a lot faster, to have a pleasant experience. When you smell these things, your body, again, is fearfully and wonderfully made. When you smell a certain aroma, it releases different hormones within your body, and serotonin, and you feel good just by smelling something. There's smells that you can smell that remind you of your childhood, that bring you into a place of remembrance when you smell that stuff. And the same thing works with incense and essential oils and all of those kind of things. And so applying those to your spiritual practice, I would say, is definitely a must. Again, you don't need anything outside of you. That's where the power is with Christ and what he did to break down the veil between us and God. And religion tries to kind of rebuild that. It's funny that as we see religion falling and crumbling, as it comes in layers, it almost seems like the Pope has claimed in the past that salvation only comes through the Catholic Church, and you have to be a Catholic to inherit eternal life and inherit salvation. And you have to be a member of the Catholic Church, and specifically have to take the Eucharist. You have to partake of that, which is communion. That's what they believe. And if in any other Christian sect, Christian denomination, Protestant churches or whatever, were heretical, that you can't encounter God, that you weren't a part of the body of Christ if you weren't a part of the Catholic Church. So that's what they believed, and it's really interesting that they believe that you have to go and confess your sins to a priest to have forgiveness from God. And now the Pope is doing statements with people who can't make it to Mass because we're in quarantine, we're in lockdown. How do I find forgiveness? People are panicking. They got this. They need to confess these things to the priest so that they can find forgiveness. Funny thing is that that's not even about repentance. Asking for forgiveness is not repentance. You have to bring forth meat worthy of repentance. You don't just say you're sorry. You got to do something to change it. Quit doing it. Turn from the things that are killing you. But the Pope released a statement and said, look, if you can't make it to Mass, we can't do it. Just bring your petition straight to God, directly to God. Now you tell us we can go directly to God, that we don't need you. We don't need a middleman between us and God, because Jesus was that middleman. Jesus is our bridge. He bridged the gap between us and God, where there was a veil in between, where there was a gulf in between. Jesus bridged that gap. And so with that, we can approach the throne of grace boldly, as the scripture says, which is beautiful. And that's the thing too, going back, tying into the psychedelic experience, or the criticism that I have for those who believe that the manna from heaven were magic mushrooms. I don't think that they were, because Moses and Aaron were the ones who were hearing from God. They're eating the mushrooms. They're going to heaven and all these things, encountering God on top of the mountain, in the heavenly realms, and they're hearing from God, but all the other people weren't. See, that's what removes the power from this organized religion, or this power structure, is the fact that I don't need you to talk to God anymore. Like in with the Catholic Church and these different institutions, even the Protestant Church as well, it's like, I need the pastor, I need this person to commune with God for me. I need the pastor to talk to God. Well, if everyone's taking psychedelics and hearing God, then I don't need Moses and Aaron. because I can go straight to God. But the people were coming to the leaders and saying, okay, what is God saying? And then he would tell them, okay, God is saying this. This is what we do. This is where we go. Listen, if you're partaking of magic mushrooms, you're dealing with God directly. You're directly dealing with God, and there is no middleman of Moses in them. So that's the scrutiny that I had. It was only Moses and Aaron who were having these mystical experiences and things like that, and the rest of the people really weren't dealing with that. So do I think that it's mushrooms? For sure. But I don't think that it was psychedelic mushrooms that the manna was in the desert, because it pulls the power from the priest and from the infrastructure there, which we have with religion, Catholic Church, that kind of thing that we're experiencing now. But it is a beautiful experience for you to tap into the divine and go within for yourself. And Jesus, is the bread of life. That's what Amberlyn Rose says. I thought manna was bread. No, we don't really know what manna was, but I think that if we're looking at the description, it was something that came every morning with the dew, right? It was with every morning. And that's when do you go pick mushrooms? In the morning, before the sun hits it. When it's out in the sun too long, it goes away. And that was the thing about the mushrooms, and that you had to pick it early. You can only pick as much for that day. You didn't collect for next week or the rest of the month. You collected for that day, so that you would always be, going out and traveling and moving, and you would go out and get your sustenance for the day. Again, it goes back to the prayer, give us this day our daily bread. And so it is the bread or food from heaven. I think the word is interchangeable as well, the food from heaven. And that it would go bad. It would actually rot, and worms would eat it. If they carried any more for other people, like they could only have that much for the day. So I don't think that would be bread that was showing up and doing that. But I think it really makes sense that it was some type of manna, or the word literally means, what is this? It means, what is this? So, Flying Penguin says Psalm 78:25 indicates manna may have been bread of angels. Again, I don't know if we look up the word bread, if it means literally it was made with yeast and dough, right? If the bread just means sustenance, just like the word meat. When we read meat in the Bible, it's not talking about like animal meat. It's talking about sustenance. This is your food. This is what's going to sustain you. This is your meat. Again, the scripture I just quoted, bring forth meat worthy of repentance. It's like, what is it? Meat worthy of repentance. It's talking about sustenance. Show me something that's going to sustain you, that you don't need that anymore. So I think that's the interesting thing when it comes to the word play and the words that are being used there. Always got to go back to the Greek and Hebrew and see what words are being used, and we can really see a bigger picture of the allegory and the stories that are being shared with us through the scriptures. The names of the places that these people are at, the names of the people, the names of the kings, the names of the outside invading armies, all of that stuff is symbolic about where you are in your life. We'll do more shows on the allegory within the Bible, because it's definitely there. It's a story about our spiritual journey and the mystical experience that we have with God. It's within the Bible. It's the most beautiful book that you'll read, the most magical book that you'll read. I wanted to kind of draw these lines here. There was two differences between, like we had the live stream yesterday that we talked about the Sabbath, especially for Seventh-day Adventists. I interviewed a Seventh-day Adventist last night, and they believed that was how you enter salvation, was keeping the Sabbath. That if you keep the Sabbath, then that's the sign that you are a believer and that you are going to make it into the kingdom of heaven if you do Saturday or Sabbath rest, if you enter the Sabbath. And then on the other end, the Catholic tradition believes that you're going to get into heaven if you partake of the Eucharist, if you partake of communion under the Catholic Church. Interesting thing is that they're both at odds with one another with that belief, and you run into problems with that stuff when you claim exclusivity. that this is how you get into the kingdom of heaven, or this is the only way that you can do it. Because how many people, again, we talked about this yesterday, are keeping Sabbath as far as going to Sabbath service. They're not working because they're trying to honor the Sabbath or whatever, but other areas of their life they're falling in, they're stumbling in. They're racist, they're backbited, they're always causing confusion, they're always gossiping, all the things that Christ like rebuked, you know what I'm saying? He warned us against. But as long as you're keeping the Sabbath, you're getting in. Or as long as you're partaking of communion, you're getting in. So this was some of the two different things that from today's episode talking about the communion, and then yesterday talking about the Sabbath with the Seventh-day Adventists, some of the things that kind of like stand out for them because they claim exclusivity. Again, the Pope says that they are the only true church and that salvation is only of the Catholic Church, and every other church, Protestant church, is a liar and a thief. That's what they believe. I don't believe that. I believe that salvation was won for all of humanity through the person of Jesus Christ. And once you know that, you can engage that. You can ask for that encounter with the person of Jesus Christ, with the Holy Spirit, and with the Father, because freely we have received, freely we give it, and we can tap into that for ourselves, which is the most beautiful thing. It's the gospel, and it's awesome that you don't have to do anything for God to love you. You don't have to do anything for God to receive you. That what Jesus won on the cross is the champion. So that's what I believe, man, and that's what I teach. Again, just because I interview people doesn't mean that I agree with everything that they talk about. I try to find common ground and we try to build there. Just because I don't cut somebody off and rebuke them or cut them off and correct them on some kind of theology doesn't mean that I believe with it. It's something that's been said a lot lately. A lot of people have been using the word Lucifer interchangeable with Satan, and I know a lot of you guys know, or the devil, and know that there's a huge difference with that word, and Lucifer is not the devil, and I don't believe that. I wrote about it in my book. But to cut someone off every time that they mention that Lucifer is the devil or something like that would get old really quick. And I could just see some of the last couple of podcasts that I did that the guests have kind of made that connection, which I think the majority of people do. They think that Lucifer is the devil. So for me to correct them, it would mess up the conversation. So that's what that is. Choose your battles wisely at the same time. So, man, shout out to everybody. Thank you guys for the donations and becoming the patrons. Renita just became a patron. Thank you so much, my friend. Jay Phoenix, thank you yesterday again for the donation. I'd seen you left a comment asking if I addressed your question. I'm gonna I wish I can go back to him. Let's see. Amberly says, I don't believe that exclusivity either. Can you explain the difference? I don't know if you're talking about the difference. I don't know what you mean. Martha says the Christ consciousness within, the way, the truth, and the life. Yep. Having your personal encounter, not leaning on someone else's experience. That's more of like the Baptist type of belief system. Is like, people have this encounter and then they want people to take their word for it. I've seen God, listen to my words, turn away, and that kind of thing of preaching on the street corner about this man's revelation of God. I've seen hell, it's dark, be careful, that kind of thing, versus God is beckoning us to come and have our own encounter with him. We don't have to ride on the back of someone else's experience. I'm really big into letting people have their own encounter with the divine, because no one can take that away from you. I can talk you out of doctrine. Belief systems change. The best of us believe one thing one year. The next year, we're not caught dead preaching and believing those things that we once believed. And there's so many people who feel that way. So belief systems and doctrines change daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Like it's always expanding. But your encounter with God, I believe that's eternal. And so that we all can go within and have our own encounters. Amberly's asking again. She says, "Can you explain the difference about Lucifer and Satan?" Again, I've got a lot of. I've talked about it in my book. We've done different snippets and shows about this as well. But just really quick, I'll just share that the term Lucifer is only used once in the entirety of the Bible. It's only used once, and it's used in Isaiah 14, and it's used as a reference or a metaphor for the king of Babylon who had God's people in bondage. And in the book of Isaiah, it's a prophecy written to the king of Babylon. It says that if you do not let God's people go, you're going to fall like Lucifer, which the word Lucifer, it is a title. It's not a person. It's not a being. It's a title. It's a metaphor. It means the bright and morning star. What is the bright? And it's called that in the scriptures, and people will say they think that that's what the devil is called and things like that. The bright and morning star is the planet Venus. It's the brightest star or planet in the morning sky. When you go out, if you stargaze and you're out there, let's say 5 a.m., 4:30, 5 a.m., the brightest thing that you're going to see in the sky is going to be the planet Venus, until the sun, which is a metaphor for God or for Christ, the sun rises in all of its glory, and the planet Venus is cast out of heaven. You once were shining in your glory and you ruled the night sky, but now you're gone, and now you have to bow to the Son of God, which is rising in our hearts, literally, right? And so there's the analogy there about the planet Venus falling out of heaven. The stars are falling, and the Son of God is rising. And so this was an analogy, because if you keep reading, it says that, is this not the man that did cause the nations to tremble? It doesn't say that is this not the entity? Is this not the power? Is this not the spirit that caused the man? Is this not the old devil from the beginning that caused the nations to tremble? It says, is this not the man? And because if you do not repent, you're going to fall, just like this analogy. Kings and rulers fell all the time throughout the scriptures. They fell all the time. The king, and it's usually dealing with the Babylonians and the Chaldeans and things like that, is that they fall from heaven. They fall from grace. The king of Babylon did that on many occasions, and there's one talking about Babylon falling within an hour. The greatest king and the most pompous person, because they didn't repent, because they did not quit persecuting God's people. Within an hour, this king was brought to ruin, and he was crawling on all fours, eating grass like a cow, because he didn't repent. Again, the analogy of the bright morning star in all your glory being cast out of heaven and fallen. So it's a title. So it means light bearer. Lucifer. Lu or luminous means light. Lux is light. Lucius, right? Light. And cipher is bearer, one who bears the light. So it even calls Jesus the light bearer. And I know it gets deep, but us as Christians, us as believers, are illuminated. We are illuminated with the light of Christ. So the word in and of itself means a light bearer. You are light. You have a light within you, and you have to let that light shine before all men. You are the bearers of the true light of Christ. Again, the definition of the word, it gets me in trouble, but you're a Luciferian, because you are a carrier of the light. In the essence of that word and what it really means, not of what it means now. You go around calling yourself I'm a Lucifer as well, or they're gonna look at you crazy. Just like a lot of people probably looking at me crazy right now talking about this. I put this in my music, and I try to give you some analogies, but again, it's only used once in the Bible. So how can we make some type of doctrinal belief that Lucifer is the definition or the name of the devil? It's only used one time, and it's not talking about the devil. It's talking about the king of Babylon. Is this not the man that did cause the nations to tremble. Again, there's the analogy. Everything is astrological within the Bible. The Bible is pure astrology, as you would say. Santos Bonacci would say, from Genesis to Revelation, it's talking about the inner workings of astrology, which is the inner workings of the soul and the journey of man. As you take your journey and progress throughout the zodiac, it's as above, so below. Hey, I don't like that phrase. Okay, on earth as it is in heaven. What's going on in heaven is going on within you. Your anatomy shines and reflects what's going on in what we would call outer space, which is heaven, right? Past the stars, the place where God dwells, which we go in to communicate, and we're translated to heaven. We are seated in heavenly places even now with Christ. So it's the beauty, it's the mystery of the gospel of knowing who we are as sons and daughters of God. God has given us signs and seasons through the stars and the suns and the planets and the alignments. That's how we are able to tell what day it is, what month it is, when is the Sabbath. You don't know the Sabbath unless you're following the moon, because you were given every seven days as the Sabbath, that you would enter into God's rest, and you're also given every new moon as a Sabbath as well. So take time to rest and reflect and get with your family and honor the Most High. Now, this is something we should be doing daily, but on these Sabbaths you would refrain from work. You wouldn't do anything strenuous, but you would do alms and do good works. And we talked about it last night on the last podcast. This was the episode with Valorian, aka Ashone. If you haven't heard that episode, it was really good. We talked a lot about the Sabbath on that, so make sure you check that out. Amberly says it's hard not to shudder at the sayings we've been taught to fear. Oh, for sure. You hear, I mean, that's cognitive dissonance, is that I don't care what you say, my pastor would never lie to me. I don't care what you say, this is the way that my mom told me, or my grandparents raised me up in this. So there's this fight or flight that kind of kicks in. You're talking about shuddering when we hear conflicting beliefs that go against what we've been told our whole life. What do you mean everybody gets into heaven? I've been told that only Christians get to heaven, or only Catholics get to heaven. What do you mean that Jesus died for everybody? What do you mean? So we hear things and we immediately hit that fight or flight. We want to defend it. Our blood literally starts to boil and we get angry. And I think that's a good indicator where we need some work in that area, right? When we feel ourselves, that anger rising up, or that fear, the fight or flight, we got to explain it, or we got to turn it off, or you're a liar, right? I've been in many conversations where that people start kind of manifesting those fruits, but other people do it all the time. But you got to check when you're doing it. When you're listening to a podcast and there's a guest who brings something that just makes you mad, it's like, just because this person believes this, because they're sharing it, doesn't mean it's true. Just because they're sharing it, but why are you getting mad? Why are you getting angry because someone believes something differently than you believe? Well, it's because they're leading people astray, and I have a right. I have to stand up for the truth. Okay, the truth doesn't need you to stand up for it. The truth is going to be the truth whether you say anything or not. At the end of the day, the truth will stand. That's one thing that I know for sure. You know what I'm saying? We get to defend truth. We get to stand up for it. But it's always evolving. It's ever changing. We're always coming to a deeper knowledge and revelation of God's beauty and God's truth. And what we keep finding out, the more we have the mystical experience, the more we search the scriptures, is that God is more inclusive than we thought he was. That his love is beckoning everyone, all men, to come to him. If they will repent, then God will deal with them on a one-on-one basis. That's what the Bible talks about. The book of Acts continues to say that. We've been told that Jesus only came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus only came for these people. Only these people get to partake of. But it's like, no, it's for everyone, not for our sins, but also the sins of the entire world. And while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. That, my friend, is the gospel. And that is an offense to a lot of people who feel like you're doing something that got you closer to God. That's the thing with the Sabbath, as far as like it kind of gets into this pride thing, a lot of this stuff, which again is why Jesus had to come, because we felt like our deeds made us more holy. We felt that our deeds got us closer to God than the next person. Now, let's get this straight. There are things that you can do I don't think they get us closer to God. I think that our perception, it lets us see how close we are to God. And there's things that get within our perception. There's things in our life that we need to get rid of so that we can see Jesus more clearly. I don't think that we're ever any more closer to God than we are right now. We're all loved. All you have to do is change your affections and your desires and think about it and meditate on these things, as the scripture says. And there's revelations as you grow from glory to glory about the beauty of God. So I think it's something that we're working through, not something that God's working through to accept us, because he sees us already complete through the finished work of Christ. That's the beautiful thing. So for us, there's things that we can do to move past hindrances within our own vision, within our own life that we're dealing with. And they're all lessons to teach us about the beauty of God and forgiveness and grace and things like that. So this is the journey. It's the hero's journey. We're all on it. Again, it's the beauty and mystery wrapped up in God that we find through the person of Jesus, man. With that being said, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Really enjoyed this episode. If you want to support, head on over to patreon.com and /TruthSeekah. You get access to everything that I'm bringing to the table. Got new music out, new songs. Pretty good. It's called Breath, Engaging God Through the Breath. Make sure you check it out. You get access to that by becoming a patron as well. With that, I'm going to say peace and shalom, y'all. We'll do it again very soon. Tomorrow, actually. It's going to be good. What's up, Jeff, Amberly, Brenda, Teal, Adam, Starseed, Christopher? What's up, brother? Go through some of these names right quick here at the last few minutes. Let's see. That's pretty much it for now. People pop in and out throughout the whole thing. So shout out to everybody hanging out with us here in the chat. Love you guys. Peace, peace.
Your will so much higher than mine, so much higher than mine, so much deeper than mine, so much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.
Wait a minute. Hold that dial. Don't go anywhere. I have to talk about one more thing. I have to give a shout out to some of our people in our community. I want to give this story. I know I posted it on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, but I want to share with those people on the podcast who are listening. I think this is where the biggest audience is anyway. So I want to give a shout out to a couple of people in our community. Yesterday, I woke up. And I woke up kind of late because I stayed up late. So I woke up about 9, and I woke up. My wife was already up. And I walk out into the living room, and there's these 2 big packages. And I'm like, what is that? What is it? And she's like, my wife's like, well, I guess you ordered some computer monitors. I was like, oh, I did? I didn't remember ordering any computer monitors. But then I was like, you know what? Last week, I was on Amazon looking at computer monitors. I wonder if I accidentally ordered one. Not 1, but 2, because I wanted another computer monitor. I needed a new one. And I was like, man, what is this? So I'm like, I'm about to go. I just woke up. I'm about to go get on Amazon and see if I ordered this stuff. And about that time, I was like, wait, hold on. I know where this came from. Fluman told me a week ago, you're going to have some packages. Here's the routing numbers. Just so you don't get paranoid, because people will send me gifts and I don't know where they come from, and I feel like I ordered them, or I want to at least tell the person thank you. Some people will send gifts and not even give a name, but Fluman's like, hey, you got some packages coming through. That's all he said. And I was like, Fluman told me that I had 2 packages coming. This is it. Fluman ordered me these things, man. And I went and opened them, and he hit me up and said that him, Joshua Fluman, aka the Gothic Mystic, and Christy Johnson both went together to bless me with 2 huge widescreen computer monitors, which my setup is these huge, massive TV screens or monitors in front of me now. So I have 3 screens, and they're huge, and they're really cool. So thank you guys for supporting, for believing in the work, for just letting God use you and blessing me and my family and taking it to the next level. And it really helps because I'm having to move windows around and see where the chat is, and see it helps so much to have these monitors. And the funny thing is I was actually looking at monitors the week before that you guys ordered them and sent them to me. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. That means the world. You guys rock. If anybody wants to send anything, again, I get gifts from time to time, but the coolest thing is the stuff that people make. Richie Breath 2 weeks ago sent me just a beautiful letter about the impact of my ministry and what I'm doing. He sent me his stickers that he had made up, which are really cool, which he's going to be going live too as well. So I'm going to share out some of his stuff. Imaginaut.406. He says, remember to breathe. I've got posters. I've got artwork. I've got anointing oils and so many mugs that people have made me, all kind of really cool stuff. And if you'd like to send anything, look at the bottom of the description of any video or any place that you're listening to this. And the address is there. So if you got fan art or any of that kind of stuff, it's really cool to get that stuff. So with that, I'm going to say peace and shalom again. Thank you guys for being a blessing to me, and it means a lot. Shalom, everybody. Peace.